Raymond Ellis eased his worn leather gloves onto his hands, fingers familiar with the grooves of the grips like old friends. The sun hung low over the Georgia pines, dappling the gravel road with golden light and shadows that danced with the slow sway of the trees. The Sunday ritual was as sacred as any prayer. An hour or two on his motorcycle, the wind tearing through his salt and pepper beard, the engine's growl a steady heartbeat beneath him. His Harley roared alive beneath him, a faithful companion for over 2 decades. Ray pulled his black helmet down, adjusted the chin strap, and kicked the bike into gear. The familiar rumble soothed the ache left behind by the house's emptiness. His wife, Clara, gone now 3 years. Cancer had taken her fast, left him with memories and silence. He rolled out of his driveway, the rural town of Cedar Creek stretching wide and quiet before him. Small clusters of houses dotted along the main road, a gas station with flickering neon, and an old diner where the regulars still argued over politics and baseball scores. Ray nodded to Mr. Jenkins, who was watering his lawn in a faded straw hat. The old man waved back, slow and steady. This was peace. The way the wind caught his jacket as he cruised past the cotton fields. The smell of earth and grass and distant wood smoke. The gentle hum of life moving without rush. Ray kept his speed steady, cruising just below the limit. His mind wandered as it always did, memories of Clara laughing, the time they'd taken a trip down to Savannah, the children grown and scattered like leaves. This ride was therapy, the road his confessional. About 10 miles out, a sudden flash of red and blue lit up behind him. Ray eased off the throttle, feeling the familiar pull of tension coil in his gut. 2 young officers in a marked cruiser pulled up alongside him, their faces sharp and unfamiliar. The passenger window rolled down. "Sir, you need to pull over," one said, voice clipped. Ray nodded and slowly brought the bike to the shoulder, the gravel crunching beneath his tires. He killed the engine and lifted off his helmet, revealing a face etched with years and patience. "Afternoon, officers. What's going on?" His voice was calm, respectful. The driver, a thin-faced white man who looked barely out of his 20s, stepped out first. "We've been watching you for a while, sir. You were weaving in and out of your lane back there, reckless driving." Ray blinked. "Weaving? Reckless? Sir, I've been riding these roads longer than you've probably been alive. I keep it steady." The passenger officer joined them, his eyes cold and sharp. "Sir, we're going to need your license and registration." Ray reached into his jacket pocket and handed over his wallet without hesitation. "Mind telling me why you think I was weaving?" Ray asked, still steady, trying to keep the moment from escalating. The driver glanced at the road behind. "It's our job to keep the roads safe. You understand that?" "Yes, sir, I do," Ray said. "But I've never had a ticket in this town, and I ride this stretch every Sunday. This feels, well, I don't know, unexpected." The passenger suddenly stepped closer. "You mind if I ask you something? Where you headed today?" Ray was quiet a moment. "Just out for a ride. Clear my head. It's what I do." The officer's expression darkened. Ray took a breath. "If you need to verify anything, I'm happy to cooperate. But can I please have your badge numbers?" The driver's jaw tightened. "I'm going to have to ask you to step back," the passenger officer said, voice raising. Ray's calm started to crack, but he kept his hands visible on the handlebars. "I'm just asking for your badge numbers, officer. I respect the law, but I also have a right to know who I'm speaking to." The passenger officer's hand hovered near his holster. "Back up," the driver muttered into his radio. Ray could feel his heart pounding now. The peaceful ride was slipping away, replaced by something older, something worn deep into his bones. He looked at the officers, young, full of energy, authority, and something else he couldn't quite name. Fear. Suspicion. Something that didn't sit right. "Sir, you're not under arrest," the driver said, voice steady but clipped. "Just cooperating will make this easier." Ray nodded slowly, his mind spinning back decades to other stops, other moments where respect was given or withheld by nothing more than skin and circumstance. The sound of tires rolling up behind the cruiser caught his attention. Another squad car, blue and white, pulled up and parked with a thud. One of the backup officers stepped out, older, more composed. Ray's gaze met his briefly, something unspoken passing between them. The initial tension eased, if only a little. The older officer approached, hands open and non-threatening. "Evening, Mr. Ellis. I'm Officer Daniels." Heard there was some confusion. Ray offered a tired nod. "Evening, sir." "Yes. I'm not sure what this is about." Daniels turned to the younger officers. "Ray's a well-known guy around here. Never had a complaint. Let's make sure we keep this professional." The younger driver seemed to bristle but stepped back. Ray reached for his helmet again, shaking his head slowly. "Thank you, Officer Daniels," he said. "I just want to ride in peace." Daniels nodded. "We all do." Ray climbed back on the bike, the engine growling back to life beneath him. He eased onto the road, watching the cruisers fade behind him. The wind hit his face, cold and sharp again. But the silence he'd sought was fractured now. His ride home was quieter than before, the hum of the engine louder than the thoughts swirling in his mind. The road stretched out ahead, endless and uncertain. Ray's heart was already pounding when the cruiser's headlights flashed behind him. He hadn't done anything wrong, but something about the sudden arrival of backup sent a knot twisting deeper in his gut. The alley was quiet, the only sound the distant hum of city traffic and the sharp tapping of his bike tires on the cracked pavement. "Sir," a new voice called out, clipped and hard. "Step off the bike." Ray slowed, pulled to a stop, and swung his leg over the saddle. He raised his hands just enough to show he wasn't reaching for anything. "Am I being detained?" The question hung thick in the humid air, charged and electric. One of the officers stepped forward, younger, with a badge gleaming against the dark fabric of his uniform. "You're going to stand still and keep your hands where I can see them," he said, tone more command than question. Ray's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. "Am I being detained?" The older cop who had stopped him initially shrugged as if the question were tedious. The younger one reached out suddenly and grabbed Ray's wrist. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," the young officer snapped. Ray's ID slipped from his pocket and hit the pavement with a dull clang. He glanced down as the officer's grip tightened and winced. His fingers twitched, reflexively trying to grab it, but he didn't resist. A small crowd was gathering now, drawn by the commotion. Phones appeared, screens glowing in the dusk. The younger officer bent down and picked up the ID, holding it in front of him. The badge caught the light, U.S. Federal Marshal, retired. The officer laughed, a short, sharp bark that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, sure, old man. And I'm the president." He waved the ID dismissively. "Fake badge." The older cop frowned but said nothing. Ray swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. "It's real." The young officer shoved Ray hard against the hood of a cruiser. Ray felt the impact in his ribs, a sharp ache spreading. His breath hitched, but he didn't fight back. "Hands behind your back," the officer ordered. Ray complied, the cold metal of the cruiser's hood pressing into his forehead. The crowd grew louder. Voices mixed with the buzzing of recording phones. Ray could hear snippets. "He's not doing anything. Why are they harassing him? Look, he's a vet. Cuffing a retired marshal? This ain't right." Ray closed his eyes briefly. The pain in his side was nothing compared to the sting of humiliation. He had spent decades serving the law. Now, the law was treating him like a suspect. The older officer moved closer, voice lower but firm. "Just stay calm, Ray. We're sorting this out." Ray nodded once, then looked up. The crowd was watching. Phones pointed like weapons. The weight of the moment pressed down hard. The first time Marcus saw the video, his heart dropped. A kid he barely knew, some guy from the neighborhood, was live streaming the entire scene on TikTok. The screen was split into two views, the shaky handheld camera zooming in on the officers, and a comment feed scrolling up fast. "Why are they stopping him? This looks like harassment. Are those even real cops? Dude looks so scared. Poor kid." The clip started right as Ray was pulled off his bike by two uniformed men, the ones Marcus had seen before, Ron and Dale. But the uniforms weren't official. The badges didn't match any police department Marcus had ever seen. The police cars? Just beat-up SUVs with magnetic lights slapped on top. And the officer's behavior? Over the top. Demanding Ray's ID, grilling him about his bike, his friends, even where he lived. Marcus could feel the heat rise in his chest. It wasn't just the injustice. It was the knowledge that so many people were watching. Seeing the same thing he saw: two men playing cop with no authority at all. Within minutes, the TikTok video went viral. The comment section exploded with outrage, confusion, and support for Ray. Teenagers, parents, activists, they all weighed in. Marcus refreshed the page obsessively, watching the numbers climb. Views ticked from thousands to tens of thousands, then 100,000. Local news outlets began picking up on it. Some reporters posted links on their social feeds. The hashtag badges without authority trended within hours. Meanwhile, across town, Dana Brooks, a local civil rights attorney, was finishing a meeting when her phone rang. "Dana, you need to get down to Pleasant Oaks. There's an incident involving some unauthorized patrol officers and a teen. It's heating up fast." Dana frowned. "Details." "Two guys in fake uniforms stopped a kid, maybe illegally detained him. The video's already blowing up on TikTok." Dana grabbed her jacket and headed out, her mind racing. Cases like this weren't new, but the brazenness of two men pretending to be officers in a quiet suburb was. If these guys got away with it, it could set a dangerous precedent. When Dana arrived, a small crowd had gathered near the cul-de-sac where the incident happened. Parents whispered anxiously, teens took photos, and reporters jostled for position. Ray stood off to the side, arms crossed, shoulders hunched. His bike was parked nearby, looking battered and out of place amid the shiny SUVs and expensive pickups. The two officers stood by their vehicle, arms folded, watching everyone with thinly veiled irritation. Dana approached with purpose. Her sharp eyes assessed the scene quickly. She stepped in front of Ron first. "Excuse me," Dana said firmly. "I'm Dana Brooks, civil rights attorney. I need to see your body cam footage of this incident immediately." Ron smirked. We don't have body cams. This isn't the police department. Dana's gaze hardened. Then what exactly are you? Community patrol, Dale interjected, trying to sound official. Dana raised an eyebrow. Community patrol without badges or permits. Interesting. The two men exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable now. Dana pulled out her phone and dialed. I have contacts at the district attorney's office and the Department of Justice. They're watching this too. Ron's smirk faded. Look, ma'am, we're just trying to keep the neighborhood safe. By stopping kids and treating them like criminals. Dana's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. You're overstepping. And you're breaking the law. Ray's face flushed with humiliation as he listened. What had started as a simple bike ride home had turned into a public spectacle. Dana stepped beside him and lowered her voice. Ray, they can't arrest you without cause. Don't say anything. Let me handle this. The officers tried to push back, but Dana's presence shifted the atmosphere. Rumors spread fast, a lawyer was on scene, the community was watching, and cameras were rolling. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, after several tense exchanges, Ron pulled out a citation book and wrote a ticket. You're being fined for riding a bike without a helmet and impeding traffic, Ron said, handing the slip to Ray. And your bike's being impounded. Dana shook her head, but there was no use arguing now. The ticket was minor, but the message was clear: Ray had been targeted. As Dana helped Ray gather his things, she turned back to the officers. This stops now, she warned. I'll be in touch with the authorities, and I suggest you reconsider your little patrol. Ron and Dale exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. Later, back at home, Ray stared at his impound ticket. The bike his only way around was gone. The embarrassment still stung. His phone buzzed with notifications: friends, strangers, reporters, even local officials. Some messages were supportive. Others, like Marcus's, offered advice and solidarity. Ray's mother sat beside him, holding his hand. They think they can intimidate you, she said softly. But you're stronger than they realize. Across town, Marcus sat in front of his laptop, watching the TikTok video again. He posted a comment: this isn't just harassment. It's impersonation. We need to stop this. And the world was listening. The sun was barely up when the first call came in. Marcus was still rubbing sleep from his eyes when his phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand. The local news station had picked up the story. What had started as a neighborhood dispute was now splashed across television screens and social media feeds throughout the county. FBI agent confronts Hoaboles, the headline read. He scrolled through the article, watching clips from the viral video, reading comments from neighbors and strangers alike. Everyone had an opinion, some supportive, some skeptical. But what caught his eye wasn't the media storm. It was the update from the police department. The chief's office had just completed the background check on him. Ray Bell. The real story behind the man who'd stood in front of the Hoa board that night. Across town, in the sterile fluorescent glow of the police department's conference room, Chief Karen Michaels sat behind a cluttered desk, her phone pressed tightly to her ear. Yes, ma'am. The background check confirms it. The voice on the other end was calm but clipped. Ray Bell. 32 years with the FBI. Multiple federal commendations. Special operations. Undercover work. No surprises in his file. Karen closed her eyes, sighing heavily. The room felt smaller by the second. We need to manage this, she said quietly. Understood. I'll have the press release drafted by noon. Karen hung up and looked out the window at the city below. She knew what this meant. The department was under a microscope, and the last thing they needed was a scandal. Back at his apartment, Ray stared at the text messages flooding his phone, news reporters wanting interviews, neighborhood groups rallying behind him, and local police officers sending cryptic warnings to stay careful. His jaw clenched as he read through the police department's official statement, posted just minutes ago, regarding the incident involving Mr. Bell and members of our department. We consider it a regrettable misunderstanding. The officers involved were acting within protocol and in good faith. We support their commitment to community safety. Ray's fingers trembled slightly. The word misunderstanding felt like a slap. He wasn't going to let them rewrite the story. By midday, reporters had gathered outside the police department, their cameras rolling and microphones ready. Chief Michaels stepped out to face them, carefully calibrated smiles in place. This incident was unfortunate, she said smoothly. Our officers responded based on information available at the time. We have since confirmed Mr. Bell's identity and commend his service. The officers involved are on paid administrative leave pending further review. We're committed to transparency and upholding the law. Questions fired like rapid gunshots. Chief, why the delay in verifying Mr. Bell's identity? Were the officers trained adequately to handle this? Does the department have a history of targeting federal agents or other officials? Karen deflected and reassured. The statement was a calculated attempt to calm the storm. But inside, Ray was boiling. He refused to be the victim of spin control. That afternoon, he scheduled a press conference of his own, sending out invitations to every major outlet within a 100-mile radius. I'm done letting them tell the story for me, he told Marcus over the phone. Marcus nodded in support. We'll be there. This changes everything. The conference room at the City Hall was packed by the time Ray arrived. Reporters shoved microphones forward, cameras clicked rapidly, and the buzz of anticipation filled the air. Ray stepped up to the podium, the weight of years in law enforcement evident in his posture. He cleared his throat. I am Ray Bell, he began, voice steady but firm. A special agent with the FBI for over 3 decades. I've served this country in ways most people will never know, and I've never once asked for recognition or special treatment. He paused, scanning the crowd. What happened to me last week was not a misunderstanding. It was an affront to every officer, every agent, every man and woman who puts on a badge and swears to protect and serve. The room grew silent. I was detained by officers who failed to do the most basic verification and who, in doing so, threatened not just my reputation but my safety. He lifted his FBI badge, holding it steady in the sunlight filtering through the windows. I will not be quiet. I refuse to accept a narrative designed to protect a few bad actors. The media firestorm grew. The story went national. Social media exploded with support hashtags, #StandWithBell, #BadgeRespect. Calls poured into the police department demanding action. Karen Michaels was left scrambling. Within 48 hours, the 2 officers who had arrested Ray were suspended indefinitely. But the department's actions felt insufficient to many. An internal affairs investigation was opened, but some community leaders demanded more: resignations, criminal charges, systemic reforms. Ray was invited to join the review panel, a move seen as both symbolic and strategic. At home, Ray sat with Marcus, exhaustion etched into his features. Suspensions are a start, Marcus said, but you deserve more than just a slap on the wrist for those officers. Ray nodded slowly. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about accountability. About making sure no one else has to go through this. Marcus leaned forward. And you're ready to fight? Ray smiled, a tired, determined smile. I was born ready. That night, as the city buzzed with debates and headlines, Ray reflected on the long road ahead. The badge he wore was more than a symbol. It was a promise. And he would make sure it was honored. Ray's story was no longer just his own. When the local news aired the footage of his encounter with the police, his hands raised, voice calm, yet firm, something shifted. The video spread across social media like wildfire. It wasn't just about one man being stopped and searched without cause anymore, it was about a community's collective experience trapped in a loop of suspicion, fear, and injustice. The phone calls started the morning after the segment aired. "Hey, it's Marlene from church," said a familiar voice over the line. "I saw your story. I've got something similar, only I'm 75, and they treated me like I was a criminal just for walking home after dark." Ray paused, swallowing the lump rising in his throat. He hadn't expected his story to open this floodgate. "Can I record your experience? We're putting together a piece on how this affects all of us." For the next week, Ray became an unofficial spokesperson for a wave of voices long unheard. From the northern suburbs to the tiny towns dotting the highway, stories poured in. "I'm just an old man," a retired factory worker told Ray on camera. "But when they see me out at night, they look at me like I'm trouble. My daughter's been stopped 3 times this year alone," a mother from Greenville shared. "She's 16, and they say she fits the profile." Each story added weight, a painful mosaic of racial profiling and ageism woven together by fear and misunderstanding. At the same time, the local civil rights group, Southern Justice Alliance, contacted Ray. They wanted to investigate the police department's conduct, especially the unit involved in his stop. "We've seen a pattern here," their lead attorney said during their first meeting. "Your case is not isolated. There's enough for us to file a formal complaint with the Department of Justice." Ray agreed. The investigation was officially opened 2 days later. But the officers didn't stay quiet. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere grew tense and toxic. One morning, Ray's inbox flooded with anonymous emails. Leaked footage. Partial clips from his stop, edited to remove context, painted Ray as aggressive and uncooperative. Then, rumors circulated online, subtle but targeted, that Ray had falsified his federal credentials. That he was an imposter, a troublemaker. The community that had rallied around him began to question. Ray's phone buzzed with messages, some supportive, others suspicious. "Are you sure you're telling the whole truth? Why didn't you just cooperate? Why bring all this trouble on yourself?" It was relentless. He tried to stay grounded. But the smear campaign was designed to wear him down. One evening, after scrolling through the latest barrage of comments and messages, Ray sat at his kitchen table, hands trembling. His wife, Alicia, watched him quietly, her eyes full of concern. "Maybe you should step back," she said softly. "This is hurting you." "I can't," Ray whispered. "Not now. Not after everything." "But what if it gets worse?" Ray looked out the window, the glow of the streetlights casting long shadows. "This isn't just about me," he said. "It's about all of us. If I back down, who's left to speak?" Alicia nodded, but her worry didn't fade. The next day, Ray met with the Southern Justice Alliance team again. They discussed strategy, how to handle the leaks, the false accusations, the growing hostility. "We'll need a public statement," their attorney advised. "Reaffirm your credentials, your integrity. Make it clear what's happening." Ray agreed. At the press conference, standing behind the podium with cameras flashing, Ray spoke with a calm that surprised even himself. "I am a federal employee. My record is clean. What happened to me and what's happening now is an attempt to silence voices demanding justice." The statement made waves. But the smear campaign didn't stop. More interviews followed. Neighbors, colleagues, and others came forward, sharing their own stories of profiling and mistreatment. The local paper ran a series titled "Living Under Suspicion" that included Ray's story and those of others. The civil rights investigation continued, growing in scope. Despite the pressure, something remarkable happened. The community began to rally not just in protests, but in conversations. Church groups held forums. Schools invited guest speakers to talk about systemic racism and ageism. Social media groups formed to support victims of profiling. Ray, exhausted and bruised by the fight, realized his story had become a catalyst, a ripple expanding outward. Even in the face of retaliation, the conversation wouldn't be silenced. The cracked leather of Ray's old badge holder creaked softly as he pulled it from the drawer. The metal inside gleamed dull under the low light of his kitchen lamp, worn, but still intact. He ran his thumb over the edges, feeling the raised letters beneath his skin. Detective Raymond Hayes. It had been decades since he'd carried that badge. Decades since he walked away from the force, from the city's streets, from the fight. The walls around him seemed to shrink as memories flooded in snapshots from a different time. Flashback, 1984. A cramped office, buzzing fluorescent lights, the faint smell of cigarette smoke and stale coffee. Ray sat at a battered desk piled high with files and photographs, evidence of something rotten. He flipped through a report, eyes narrowing. A string of complaints, all buried. Officers involved, untouchable. Names whispered in hallways, feared. Ray slammed the file shut. "This isn't justice," he muttered. Across the room, his partner, Joe, leaned back in his chair. "You really want to poke the bear, Ray? This city eats guys like us alive." Ray looked up, face set. "Someone's gotta try." Flashback, 1986. Ray stood in a hearing room, sweat cooling on his brow as a panel grilled him over his accusations of corruption. Internal Affairs dismissed his claims. His captain told him to drop it or else. "Your career's on the line," the captain said, voice low. "Think about your family." Ray clenched his jaw. The weight of the choice pressed down on him harder than the fluorescent light overhead. Flashback, 1987. Ray's wife, Marlene, sat by the window, knitting quietly. He sat beside her, tired and worn. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," he confessed. Marlene reached out, grasping his hand. "You're fighting for what's right. Don't let them break you." But Ray saw the worry in her eyes. The final memory burned the brightest. The day he resigned. A black sedan waited outside the precinct. Ray's box of personal items was light compared to the burden in his heart. As he walked out, he glanced up at the building, the place he'd sworn to serve, and the place that had betrayed him. Back in the present, Ray rubbed his temples, the ache of old wounds lingering like a dull throb beneath his skin. He reached for his coat and stepped outside into the crisp autumn air. The cemetery was quiet except for the rustle of dry leaves skittering across the path. He walked with steady steps toward the modest headstone, polished and simple. Marlene Hayes' beloved wife and friend Ray knelt beside the grave, tracing the engraved letters with his fingers. The world felt heavier here, yet clearer. "I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing," he whispered. "This fight, it's bigger than me now. But sometimes it feels like the same old battles." He paused, closing his eyes. The memory of her smile, her faith in him, warmed the chill. "If I stay silent, I dishonor you. And everything you believed in." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded packet, a timeline he'd compiled over the past weeks, detailed accounts, documents, photos, and his badge number stamped on official letterhead. He had held back long enough. That evening, Ray sat at his desk, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, I'm Detective Hayes. Retired. I have information regarding recent incidents that I believe warrant national attention." He listened carefully, nodding as the voice on the other end grew intrigued. "I have a complete timeline, documentation, and proof of my credentials. I'm ready to share everything." He exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the past mingling with the urgency of the present. The next morning, Ray prepared his statement for the news outlet, a detailed account of everything he'd witnessed, everything he knew about corruption, internal cover UPS, and the systemic issues still persisting. He included his own story, his resignation, his reasons, the scars left behind. He hit send, the email delivering a folder packed with evidence and testimony. That afternoon, a reporter called. "Mr. Hayes, your courage is commendable. Can you meet us for an interview tomorrow?" Ray agreed, knowing that this was the moment he'd been preparing for, a chance to turn old scars into a new fight. Late that night, before the interview, Ray sat alone in his living room. Photos of Marlene smiled back at him from the mantel. He felt her presence, steady and sure. He whispered, "This is for you, Marlene. For all the fights we thought we lost." The city skyline glittered through the window, a battlefield he'd never truly left. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows of the Department of Justice's temporary field office, casting sharp lines across the rows of desks cluttered with files, laptops, and coffee cups. The hum of printers and the quiet murmur of focused voices created an almost clinical atmosphere, a stark contrast to the chaos still brewing outside City Hall. Agent Dana Thompson tapped her pen nervously against the table. Across from her, Ray Matthews sat rigidly, hands folded, eyes steely with resolve. They were surrounded by a small team of federal investigators, analysts, and legal advisors, all poring over reams of police department records, arrest logs, use of force reports, and body cam footage compliance data. The investigation was no longer about a single incident, it was a systematic audit. Dana flipped through the latest batch of documents. "Look at this, 24 arrests last quarter with no accompanying body cam footage," she said, voice low but urgent. "Not even a report explaining the missing videos." Ray frowned. "That's not an accident. They're hiding something." One of the analysts nodded grimly. "And here, use of force complaints that were marked closed without any documented investigation. Some officers have multiple complaints, but the department keeps clearing them." Ray clenched his fists. "The officers who detained me, those same guys? They have a record." "More than that," Dana replied, handing him a printed summary. "There are allegations of falsified reports, planting evidence, even intimidation. And this is just what's on paper." The team exchanged uneasy looks. Federal oversight had arrived, and the department was under scrutiny like never before. Outside the city square, a crowd had gathered under an overcast sky. Flyers handed out earlier fluttered in the breeze, emblazoned with bold letters, Justice for all, end police abuse now. Dana stood behind the podium, adjusting the microphone. Beside her, Ray scanned the crowd, a mixture of activists, victims, family members, and curious onlookers. Cameras from local news crews focused intently, capturing every word. Ray stepped forward, clearing his throat. "I'm here not just as a victim, but as someone who believes change is possible." His voice carried across the plaza. For too long, abuses of power have been swept under the rug. But today, with federal investigators reviewing the records, we know that what happened to me isn't isolated. It's part of a pattern. Dana took the microphone next, her voice steady but passionate. "This is about accountability. About transparency. About restoring trust between our communities and those sworn to protect them." She looked out at the faces before her. "The DOJ has begun a thorough review of the department's records. We have found inconsistencies, cover UPS, and attempts to silence whistleblowers. But we also see hope because those brave enough to speak out inside the department are coming forward." Inside the police precinct, whispers spread like wildfire. Officers glanced nervously over their shoulders as murmurs of investigations and suspensions grew louder. Dana and Ray's rally had sparked a wave of internal turmoil. Detective Laura Jensen sat at her desk, fingers trembling as she drafted an anonymous email to the DOJ's hotline. She paused, thinking about the consequences, then hit send. Her message detailed cases where evidence was tampered with, where use of force reports were altered after the fact, and where officers had intimidated witnesses to keep silent. She was only one voice, but soon others followed. Back at the DOJ office, Agent Thompson reviewed the growing mountain of whistleblower testimonies. "This isn't just about a few bad apples," she told Ray. "We're seeing systemic issues, patterns of misconduct, failures in supervision, and a culture that protects abusers." Ray's jaw tightened. "Then what's the plan?" Dana folded her hands. "We're coordinating with the U.S. Attorney's Office to launch formal inquiries. Criminal charges could follow. And we'll be pushing for policy reforms, mandatory body cam usage, transparent complaint processes, better training." Ray nodded slowly. "And the officers who detained me? They're under investigation for falsifying reports and obstruction of justice," Dana confirmed. "If evidence holds, they'll face serious consequences." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Media coverage intensified as more victims shared their stories. Public pressure mounted, forcing the local police chief to publicly apologize for the department's failures. At the next community meeting, Dana and Ray spoke again, this time alongside other victims and activists. Marissa, a young woman who had suffered excessive force during a traffic stop, stepped up to the microphone. Her voice wavered but grew stronger. "We are tired of being ignored," she said. "We demand justice, accountability, and real change." Applause rippled through the room. Meanwhile, inside the precinct, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Officers loyal to the old guard resisted the changes, while others quietly welcomed the reform. Dana and Ray met late one evening in a quiet cafe, both exhausted but determined. "What if this doesn't end the cycle?" Ray asked. "What if they just shuffle the bad officers around?" Dana looked out the window, the city lights shimmering like a promise. "Then we keep pushing. We keep shining a light. Because once you expose the truth, it can't be hidden forever." Ray smiled faintly. "Guess we're in this for the long haul." As the chapter closed, the DOJ's investigation deepened, the community grew more united, and a once silent police department began to reckon with its shadows. but the road to justice was only just beginning.